A bridge just appeared across Lake Victoria, 3.2 kilometers long, fully Tanzanian-funded, and now the longest in East and Central Africa. No loans, no donors, no warnings. How did Tanzania pull this off alone? Why now? And what does it change for Africa? Let's find out. Nobody was expecting it to be this massive. Nobody thought it would open this soon. And yet, just after sunrise on June 19, 2025, thousands of Tanzanians stood shoulder to shoulder near the edge of Lake Victoria, watching something almost surreal rise from the mist. The bridge didn't come with fireworks. It didn't need them. Its presence alone, stretching across the water like a giant spine, was louder than any cannon blast. Children climbed onto rooftops, traders abandoned their stalls, and local fishermen, some of whom had never left their villages, stood silently as cars rolled across a structure they'd only heard rumors about. In a country where infrastructure often lags behind ambition, this felt like time bending. The John Pombe Magufuli Bridge, a name suddenly on everyone's lips, was no longer a drawing in some dusty urban planning file. It was real. It was solid. And it had arrived quietly, then all at once. What made this moment so electrifying wasn't just the bridge's size, though at 3.2 kilometers, it is now the longest in East and Central Africa. It was the sheer contrast between what stood there before, nothing but an unreliable ferry system, and what now lay before the eyes of an entire nation. One day, people were losing hours waiting in stagnant water. Next, they were crossing the lake in minutes, windows down, music on, waving at the past disappearing behind them. The media rushed to cover the event, but even seasoned journalists struggled to keep up. Some labeled it a miracle of African engineering. Others whispered that it felt staged, too perfect, too sudden. "I thought this kind of thing only happened in Asia or Europe," one foreign correspondent was overheard saying. "Not here, not now." But it did happen. And not in the capital, not in Dar es Salaam or Arusha, but in the often overlooked lake zone. That alone felt symbolic. The periphery had become the headline. And then there was the name, Magufuli. For some, it evoked memories of ambition, controversy, and grit. For others, it was a quiet reminder that legacies don't die when presidents do. They evolve, sometimes into steel and concrete. Naming the bridge after the late president wasn't just branding, it was a tribute. It was a message that this wasn't a one-time stunt, it was continuity. It was unfinished business being finished. As President Samia Suluhu Hassan walked across the bridge during the opening ceremony, she didn't promise a miracle. She didn't need to. The structure itself was the proof. She simply declared the bridge open, and the crowd erupted. Not in choreographed applause, but in raw, contagious celebration. It was the sound of a country watching itself do something extraordinary. But amid the cheers and flashing cameras, one question echoed louder than the rest. Where did the money come from? No donor logos, no aid banners, no foreign flags fluttering in the background. The usual fingerprints of international assistance were missing. And that raised eyebrows, not just in the crowd, but across the continent. Because if Tanzania had built this on its own, with no loans or hand-holding, then this wasn't just an engineering marvel, it was a threat to the old order. So, how did they do it? Where did the funds come from? And why has no one done this before? Behind closed doors, regional analysts weren't marveling at the engineering, they were dissecting the accounting. Because to pull off a $300 million project without loans in a developing country was, frankly, unheard of. It challenged assumptions that Africa must borrow to build. And it shattered the narrative that sovereignty must always come second to stability. The truth? Tanzania did something radical. It re-engineered its budgeting model to make room for something big without waiting for permission. In a series of quiet moves over several fiscal cycles, the government redirected internal revenue, much of it from gold, agriculture, and value-added tax, into a protected infrastructure fund. No flashy press conferences, no donor roundtables, just paperwork, patience, and persistence. According to leaked parliamentary budget memos from 2022 and 2023, certain large-scale imports were temporarily deprioritized to free up cash. Some subsidies were quietly trimmed. Non-critical state construction projects were paused. Civil service expansion was delayed, not indefinitely, but long enough to make the bridge a priority. The philosophy was simple: spend once, spend smart, and own it completely. President Samia Suluhu Hassan didn't campaign on this kind of economic nationalism, but after inheriting the ambitions of her predecessor and watching the rising debt anxiety across Africa, she chose a different path. Instead of asking what the country could afford, she asked what it could reimagine. What makes this even more subversive is that it wasn't just about avoiding loans, it was about avoiding the strings that come with them. In typical large-scale African infrastructure projects, international lenders dictate timelines, hire foreign auditors, import labor, and often demand private sector concessions in exchange for financing. Tanzania walked away from all of it. The bridge was built not just with local money, but on local terms. The Magufuli Bridge is, in that sense, a financial firewall. It kept out the endless meetings, the loan conditionalities, the policy nudges disguised as advice. It shielded the project from devaluation risks, currency swings, and political leverage. That control, silent and unadvertised, might be the most powerful part of the story. But this quiet revolution wasn't just about budgets and balance sheets. The decision to fund the bridge independently has rippled outward. It's changed how Tanzanians see public money. Suddenly, the question isn't, what can foreign aid do for us? But what else can we do if we stop waiting? And people are watching. From Accra to Lusaka, from Kampala to Nairobi, policymakers are dissecting Tanzania's playbook. If one country can build the biggest bridge in East Africa without a cent of foreign debt, what else is possible? What else have we been told we can't do? But bold budgeting only means something if it leads to impact. So now that the money has been spent and the bridge has been built, what does it do? What has changed on the ground for traders, drivers, and everyday people? That's where the next part of this story begins. Let's pause for a second to say, big thank you to the Black Culture Diary community, where Black voices, stories, and legacies are preserved and amplified. By becoming a member, you're not just supporting the channel, you're becoming part of a powerful cultural movement. Let's continue. You can learn a lot about a country by watching how its people move. And in Tanzania, for decades, movement across Lake Victoria was not a matter of convenience. It was a test of patience. The ferry crossing between Kigongo and Busisi was more than an hour when you counted boarding, delays, breakdowns, and the sheer unpredictability of lake travel. Some days, the wait stretched long enough for passengers to nap, buy lunch, and finish entire phone charges before boarding. But then came the bridge, and with it, time collapsed. Now vehicles that once crawled in queues for hours are crossing in just 4 minutes. 4. The difference is so dramatic that some locals have described it as teleportation. Drivers still check their watches at the shore, not out of necessity, but out of old habit. Proof that for years, time wasn't something they managed. It was something that managed them, and the shockwaves are only beginning. In those few minutes saved, entire systems are transforming. Truck drivers hauling fish, cotton, and grain from the lake zone to Dar es Salaam are saving nearly a full day of travel due to streamlined routes. For perishable goods, that's the difference between fresh and spoiled. For traders, it's the difference between profit and loss. For industries that rely on timing, especially agriculture and fisheries, the bridge is not just a shortcut. It's a supply chain revolution. One driver, transporting Nile perch from Mwanza to markets in Rwanda, said he now reaches his destination without having to ice the fish twice. That single detail, once trivial, has dramatically lowered his operational costs. Multiply that by hundreds of trucks a week, and suddenly you're looking at a quiet surge in efficiency across national borders. But it's not just about goods, it's also about people. School children who used to wake at 4 a.m. to reach classrooms across the lake are now arriving on time without exhaustion. Health workers can move between districts without relying on uncertain ferry timetables. Expectant mothers, once delayed by stalled transport and medical emergencies, now have a road beneath them instead of water that waits for no one. And perhaps most fascinating of all, movement has become predictable. In a region where unpredictability used to govern everything, from traffic to trade to tourism, this bridge has reintroduced something basic yet powerful: reliability. And with reliability comes planning. And with planning comes ambition. Because now that people know when they'll arrive, they're starting to think more seriously about where they can go. What once felt like two separate provinces, Kigongo and Busisi, are rapidly becoming one economic zone. Property values on both sides are spiking. Restaurants and shops are emerging along the new access roads. New transport routes are being charted that connect Tanzania more directly with Uganda, Rwanda, and the DRC, turning the bridge into more than just local infrastructure. It's becoming a continental corridor. Some regional planners are already referring to it as Africa's shortest long-distance trade route, a poetic way of saying that 4 minutes of road have done more to accelerate cross-border commerce than years of policy negotiations. And it's not just trucks and tourists benefiting. The bridge has begun redrawing the invisible map of who matters in national logistics. Villages that once sat quietly on the lake's edge are now hosting transport hubs, logistics terminals, and even banking kiosks. Places that were once passed over are now being passed through, and, more importantly, profited from. But behind the seamless traffic and stunning efficiency, another force is rising: opportunity. If this bridge has become a machine for movement, then what it's moving most powerfully may not be cars or goods, it's jobs. And that's where we're heading next. Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. Every bridge carries weight, but not every bridge carries promise. The Magufuli Bridge, however, is not just bearing the load of vehicles, it's carrying the weight of expectation. And nowhere is that clearer than in the ripple effect of employment, enterprise, and local transformation now radiating from both ends of the structure. The first signs were subtle. A roadside grill popped up near the Kigongo entrance, serving grilled tilapia and maize to passing motorists. Then came a tire repair station, then 2, then 5. Before long, the area that had once been little more than a dusty docking zone for slow ferries became a hive of entrepreneurial energy. These weren't planned economic zones with foreign investors and 5-year development blueprints. These were instant economies, built by Tanzanians, for Tanzanians, with nothing but proximity and possibility as capital. But the shift didn't begin when the bridge opened. It began years earlier during its construction. Over 1,500 Tanzanians were employed during the project, many of them in roles previously reserved for foreign workers, surveyors, welders, structural analysts, and drone operators. Chinese firms were contracted to build, yes, but under strict conditions, train local staff, transfer skills, leave behind more than steal. And they did. For the first time, Tanzanian engineers were not just observers of mega projects. They were in the control rooms, behind the measurements, and deep in the mathematics. This influx of high-value experience has seeded something new: confidence. Workers who once labored on the bridge are now being sought after in other national projects, from highways to stadiums to energy installations. In other words, the bridge didn't just connect land, it connected a generation to opportunity. And while the hard hats moved on, the local economy didn't slow down. It has only accelerated. With travel time across the lake slashed to mere minutes, small-scale traders and service providers are now setting up along what's fast becoming a new economic artery. Markets are springing up spontaneously, selling everything from fresh produce to electronics, clothing to construction materials. Every hour the bridge remains open, it pumps revenue into communities once paralyzed by distance. But the most surprising transformation is perhaps in tourism. What was once a detour too far from major circuits is now a logical stop for anyone heading to Serengeti, Rubondo Island, or the greater Lake Victoria Basin. Domestic tourists, long neglected in regional tourism planning, are rediscovering their own country in ways made possible only by this bridge. For many middle-income Tanzanians, weekend trips that were once too complex now require no more than a full tank and a bold spirit. Lodges are expanding. Guest houses are booking out. Tour companies are designing entirely new itineraries around the Magufuli Bridge, treating it not just as infrastructure, but as a destination. Some are even offering sunrise drive packages across the span, complete with breakfast baskets and lakeside photography. Meanwhile, bus drivers have changed their routes. Logistics firms have opened regional dispatch offices. Real estate agents report that land prices near the bridge have tripled in just 6 months. The bridge has become an engine, and everything around it is in motion. And yet, For all its economic muscle, this project still carries something heavier: the burden of meaning. Because this bridge is not just working, it's speaking. It's speaking about what Africa can build without permission. It's speaking about legacy, independence, and rewriting the rules of who gets to dream big. Something is unnerving about a project that works too well. Not because it's flawed, but because it exposes how long people have settled for less. That's what the Magufuli Bridge is doing. Not just to Tanzania, but to every capital on the continent still waiting for donors to greenlight their development dreams. This isn't just a bridge that connects two regions. It's a spotlight. And under its glare, the old narratives begin to burn. You see, once the dust of construction cleared and the economy around the bridge started roaring to life, something strange happened. The usual congratulatory telegrams from Western institutions never came. No IMF praise tweet, no World Bank ribbon-cutting ceremony, just silence. Because this bridge tells a story, those institutions were never ready to hear a story of African capability without oversight, success without supervision. It is no coincidence that the bridge bears the name of John Pombe Magufuli, a leader loved by many and feared by others for one reason. He believed Africans could build for themselves, fund their futures, and speak with their voices. Naming the bridge after him wasn't a bureaucratic formality, it was a statement. One that said, "We have not abandoned that vision. We've built it into the land." Even more provocative is where the bridge stands. Not in a capital city, not near embassies or global headlines, but in Mwanza and Geita, places long dismissed as peripheral. That geography matters, because it rewrites the development map, shifting gravity away from foreign-facing urban centers and toward regions often invisible to policy elites. The Magufuli Bridge is a decentralization of power, etched into the landscape. But perhaps the most potent force the bridge has unleashed is fear. Not among Tanzanians, but among those who rely on Tanzanian independence. Because if one country can pull off a project of this scale, funded entirely from within, then others might try. And if others try, the development aid industry, built on leverage, conditionality, and softly enforced control, starts to wobble. Already, murmurs have begun. In Zambia, politicians have floated the idea of a sovereign infrastructure strategy. In Ghana, economists are dissecting the Tanzanian model for fiscal maneuvering. In Senegal, student movements are asking uncomfortable questions. If Tanzania can do it, why can't we? The Magufuli Bridge is becoming a blueprint, not for engineering, but for audacity. But with audacity comes pressure. Tanzania now bears a quiet burden, the responsibility of showing that self-reliant development isn't a fluke, that independence isn't temporary, that a bridge built by Tanzanians for Tanzanians can last, can grow, and can inspire. It also demands vigilance. If this model succeeds, it must be protected from privatization schemes, debt traps disguised as partnerships, and foreign advisors looking to reassert control through softer mechanisms. Because symbols like this don't just inspire the oppressed, they agitate the powerful. Still, what stands over Lake Victoria today is more than a symbol. It's a border-crossing idea, a steel-clad question mark pointed at every African country still being told what it can't afford, what it must delay, and what it's not ready for. The Magufuli Bridge doesn't ask for applause. It doesn't need applause. It dares you to answer. What if this wasn't the exception? What if this is the new rule? What if the future of African development no longer arrives with a signature at the bottom of a foreign loan agreement, but with a shovel, a blueprint, and a plan no one else gets to approve? Because if 4 minutes of road can do this, what could 4 years of sovereignty build? What if Africa stopped asking for permission? What if self-reliance became the standard, not the surprise? Let us know in the comments section, what if the bridge wasn't just a road, but a warning? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about, the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.